All right, diving right in, we're taking a deep dive today into Navin Fluorine International Limited. Got their latest financial reports. And gotta say, something jumped out at me right away. They've declared a dividend.
Oh, dividends, huh? Always interesting.
Yeah, and it's the timing of it that I found, well, a little curious. This comes right on the heels of their quarter ending September 30, 2024. Makes me wonder about the why behind it?
I see, yeah. Investors often interpret those dividend announcements, especially when they're interim like this one, as a sign of confidence from the company. Like they're doing well enough to pay out shareholders even before the year's end. So definitely worth digging into those reports, see if that confidence is really warranted.
Exactly, and that's what we're here for. So let's do it. Starting with those unaudited results for the quarter. Their reported revenue came in at 518.56 crores. Now, comparing that to the previous quarter, which was 523.68 crores, it's actually a bit of a dip. Not exactly what I'd expect to see right before a dividend announcement, right?
Yeah, at first glance you'd think so, wouldn't you? Seems a tad counterintuitive. But let's broaden the perspective a bit. Look at the half-year performance, ending on that same September 30th date. Their revenue for that period totals 1,042.24 crores.
Okay, so bigger picture.
Exactly. And if you compare that to their performance during the same 6-month period, but last year, which was 962.94 crores, well, then we start to see a much more positive trend.
So a little dip in the most recent quarter, but overall, year over year, the growth is definitely there. Is that what they're banking on, do you think? Trying to reassure investors with that dividend despite that slight quarterly downturn?
It's certainly a strong possibility. Announcing a dividend can sometimes act as a counterbalance, helps offset concerns about those short-term fluctuations in revenue, especially if a company anticipates continued growth down the line. And remember, they've declared an interim dividend of 5 series per share, which, let me tell you, is a solid 250% of the face value. That's not something to just brush off.
Wow, you've definitely piqued my interest. So with a dividend payout like that, especially considering those revenue figures we just went over, what's the message there? Is this a regular thing for Navin Fluorine, or are they really trying to make a statement here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? To really grasp the weight of this dividend announcement, we need some context, we need history. Have they consistently provided dividends at this level, or is this a major deviation from the norm? And how does their dividend yield stack up against, say, industry averages or even their competitors? These are crucial questions to answer if we're going to fully understand their financial strategy.
And that's why I love a good deep dive. It's more than just the numbers themselves. It's about figuring out the why, the strategy behind those numbers. But before we get completely lost in dividends, let's circle back to those overall financials for a bit. Anything else in there besides the revenue and the dividend that stands out to you?
Absolutely. The revenue figures, they give us a good starting point, a broad overview. But if we want to understand where Navin Fluorine truly stands, we got to go deeper. Look at their expenses, their profit margins, all those other key financial indicators. That's what'll paint a more complete picture of their overall financial health and tell us whether a significant dividend payout like this makes sense.
Okay, so we're really digging into these reports now, and there's something else I noticed that I wanted to get your take on. They've granted 50,000 stock options to their managing director, Nitin G. Kulkarni. Stock options always make my head spin a little, I'll be honest.
Yeah, they can seem a little complex at first glance.
Right.
Basically, it's a way for companies to incentivize their top people. It's about tying compensation directly to performance. So in this case, these stock options give Mr. Kulkarni the right to buy company shares, but at a specific price and within a certain time frame.
So if Nevin Florian's stock goes up, those options become more valuable. Win-win for him and the company. Right.
Precisely. It aligns their interests quite nicely.
But looking at this specific grant right now, does it tell us anything interesting? Or is it just standard procedure?
Well, it's definitely something to consider. Granting stock options can often signal a company's confidence in its future. They're essentially betting on that stock price going up, making those options a very attractive incentive.
Interesting. It's like they're putting their money where their mouth is, in a way.
In a sense, yes.
Okay, before we move on, we can't forget about those auditors' reports. Got to make sure those numbers are reliable, right?
Absolutely. Those reports, both on the consolidated and standalone financials, are crucial for understanding the reliability of everything we've been discussing. Now remember, these are unaudited results. That means they haven't gone through a full, comprehensive audit, just a limited review, which is pretty standard at this stage.
Got it. So anything in those reports for Navin Fluorine specifically, anything that raised any red flags for you?
Not particularly. They did mention that the interim financials for some of their subsidiaries haven't been fully reviewed yet, but they also stated that those aren't expected to significantly impact the overall picture.
Okay, so just a minor detail in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. Quite common, actually. Without more specifics, it's not necessarily a cause for concern.
All right, that's good to know. You know what I find interesting, though? They list their primary reportable segment as their chemical business. But this report doesn't really break down the performance of that segment in any real detail.
You're right. It's interesting, isn't it? They seem to be keeping their cards pretty close to their chest when it comes to the specifics of that chemical business segment.
Yeah, makes you wonder what's going on in there.
It does make you wonder. That lack of granular data makes it much harder to figure out which specific areas within that segment are really driving their overall performance.
It's like we're looking at a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing. We can see the big picture, but without those details, it's tough to say what's really behind their success.
Exactly. You start to wonder, are there specific product lines that are doing exceptionally well? Are they benefiting from certain market conditions in certain regions? These are questions we just can't answer with the information we have.
Which kind of leaves us with more questions than answers, but I guess that's part of the fun of these deep dives, isn't it? It's not about having all the answers, it's about knowing the right questions to ask next.
Couldn't agree more. And based on everything we've uncovered today, the big question for me is sustainability. Can Navin Fluorine keep this momentum going, or are there challenges ahead that we need to be aware of?
So for investors out there, or really anyone who wants to stay out of the game, what should we be watching for in their next report? What are the key signals, positive or negative, that we should be looking out for?
Now that's the question, isn't it? Personally, I'd be keeping a close eye on that dividend payout. If they maintain this level, it could be a strong indicator that they're confident in continued strong performance. On the flip side, any change to that dividend strategy, well, that might be a sign to dig a little deeper.
And of course, we'll be looking for more details on that chemical business segment, trying to get a better understanding of what's really driving the results in that key area.
Absolutely. More transparency there would definitely be helpful. But until then, I guess Navin Fluorine's keeping a little bit of mystery alive.
A little mystery never hurt anyone. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Always fascinating to go beyond the headlines and uncover the real story behind those numbers.
My pleasure. And remember, in finance, knowledge is power. You've definitely empowered yourself today with valuable insights into Navin Fluorine.